I sure can. Alder Carter. Alder Carter.
Present.
Alder Abbas is excused. Alder Harrington McKinney.
Present.
Alder Skidmore.
Here.
Alder Hennick. Alder Tierney will be late. Alder Campbell.
Here.
And Alder Bedar is excused as well. We have a quorum present.
Thank you. Are there any, let me start over. Are there any corrections or revisions to the October 20th minutes? If not, can I get a motion to approve the August 20th minutes?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. If there's no objection, I would like to record a unanimous vote. There is no objection, so I will record a unanimous vote. And are there any corrections or revisions to the special meeting Friday, October 30th minutes? If not, can I get a motion to approve the October 30th minutes?
Move approval.
Can I get a second? It's been moved and seconded. If there's no objections, I'd like to record a unanimous vote. I see no objections. I will record a unanimous vote and both minutes are approved. Let's move on to public comment. Do we have anyone registered for public comment?
Alder
Stefan or Lisa? No, that's...
Yep, I know I've got the comments, but do we need Stefan to read the...
Yes, we do. Stefan, I forgot all about your very important part here.
All right. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members of the committee, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you're speaking. The chair, clerk, and tech facilitator, actually, you have the ability to unmute yourselves. Please use the raise hand feature when you like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. During any roll call, you will be able to unmute yourself, so please do so in order to respond. Staff, please use the raise hand feature when you're asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. We do not have any members of the public with us tonight. So President Carter, back to you.
Thank you.
And just so you know, we did have one registration on agenda item number 7. Who was opposed and did not wish to speak. And
thank you.
That was Sally Jo Peterson.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any disclosures or recusals? I see no disclosure or recusals. We'll go into the presentation. Is Janelle with us? Hi, Janelle.
Hi. Good afternoon. Sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, I was just going to say we also have somebody from your staff.
Oh, there's Ariel. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. And what I'd like to do is to appreciate the invitation to talk about this work, but I will be turning it over to Ariel to lead the presentation. And I appreciate her leadership and her coming in and kind of whipping things into shape and pulling things together in ways that I am fully supportive of. But she is the owner of this piece of work right now. So happy to answer some higher level questions if you have them, but I will turn it over to Ariel. So thank you.
It's all yours, Ariel.
All right. Thank you all. If you'll bear with me as I share my screen. Are you all seeing the screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is an update on our violence prevention efforts and our violence prevention team within Public Health Madison-Dane County. A little bit of background. So in 2018, PHMDC reassigned 2 positions to work solely on violence prevention. The work that they had been conducting since then was more focused around educating partners and the community on what a public health approach to violence prevention looks like. And so I know a few of you have gotten a variety of presentations, but that's really looking at the upstream and root causes of violence, as well as looking into some intervention practices and also looking at some what we call tertiary prevention practices that really look more to interrupt the cycle of violence. So those 3 things together really make up what a public health approach to violence prevention looks like. They also worked on establishing some new strategic partnerships in order to build that understanding around violence prevention, and also formulated some key partnerships that are needed for our data infrastructure around violence prevention. So really getting a chance to understand what types of violence we're seeing in Madison and Dane County and how we start to look at the data for everything from shots fired and homicide, and also what poverty rates look like, economic development rates look like. All of that is really encompassed in what a solid violence and violence prevention data infrastructure looks like. We've also worked to jumpstart some initiatives within the violence prevention world. And so we convened an inaugural violence prevention coalition meeting that was back in 2018 as well. We have established the Community Safety Intervention Team, also known as CSIT, and I'll give a little bit more of a more recent update on CSIT in a moment. And we've also conducted some community and police listening circles to really try to better understand what the climate is around community and their feelings and engagement with law enforcement. So where we are today, we revitalized CSIT in order to better support how the group works, functions, and is also able to analyze violent incidents and trends. So the purpose is to identify individuals and groups who are at greater risk for being shot or for pulling the trigger. And the goal is to work with these groups to establish what are needed in order to make the largest impact. So that's everything from data, the format of the meetings, looking towards having some more comprehensive databases. Right now, we're focused a lot on creating an internally facing database so that at any given moment, any of us who are working on violence prevention are able to know how many homicides we've had this year, how many shots fired incidents have we had this year, and also how many individuals and families we've been able to serve via this CSIT model. We're also looking at mapping and working really closely with MPD on that mapping and being able to identify some hotspotted areas, and also looking to an incident alert system so that we have a better way of communicating internally with the agencies and partners that we work with within the Community Safety Intervention Team. The past 4 months have really been focused on developing our roadmap to reducing violence. That is the working title of our violence prevention plan. That comprehensive plan identifies 5 key areas of work for the violence prevention unit within Madison and Dane County Public Health. And so again, one of the big things we've also done is formally establish this unit. So as I mentioned on the prior slide, we've had 2 positions that were reassigned to this violence prevention work. And we have also asked for an additional 2 positions. So those were approved in the city budget. And thank you very much for supporting us in that work. And now it's just moving through the county process. So we will hopefully have our more formal and robust violence prevention unit complete with a violence prevention manager very soon. So this is just a brief overview of the roadmap to reducing violence. Again, we are hoping, and I think I mentioned in a later slide, to release this plan in January of 2021. But this is just I would say the pre-sneak peek of the plan. And so our 5 areas that we will be working on are understanding violence in our community through data, fostering strong neighborhoods. which really lies more within our primary prevention focus. And so this is looking at those root causes and how we can really strengthen the communities and neighborhoods in which we are seeing violence occur. We are also going to be working in supporting community engagement with children, youth, and families. This we're looking at from a little bit of the primary and a little bit of the secondary lens, and really looking to not only provide support to families of those who have individuals who have been impacted by violence, either through perpetration or victimization, but also looking to work within a positive youth development framework so that we are really creating an environment for children and youth to thrive and not see violence or engaging in violence as a viable option. The fourth area we'll be working in is bolstering and increasing intervention and continuous healing for those affected by violence. So one thing that we have heard over and over from our partners and from community members is that once a violent event has occurred, we don't have enough mental health, behavioral health, or even just healing supports for those individuals, families, and or neighbors and community members who have been affected by violence. And so one of the things we're looking at here is really trying to understand and meet some of the needs within that landscape, recognizing that the need of an individual who is directly involved in an incident of violence is going to look vastly different from the neighbor who heard the shots fired but is now having trouble sleeping. And so wanting to create a system that addresses all of those needs, as all of those are contributing factors to a cycle of violence. And last but certainly not least is strengthening community capacity, engagement, and coordination of the violence prevention efforts. And so just so everybody on this call is aware, Public Health Madison-Dane County is really taking the lead on the understanding violence in our community through data aspect, and also the strengthening community capacity, engagement, and coordination of violence prevention efforts. So a lot of our driving work for the violence prevention unit will come from those two areas. So again, this is a really brief sneak peek, and I can't wait to share more with you all. But I figured I'd give you some examples of activities within each of these 5 areas. Again, this is a very robust plan. So right now we have a gambit of activities to address each of these things. So this is just a few that we've pulled out. So looking to enhance local capacity to access, analyze, and utilize violence-related data from a variety of sources. And so we've been working with partners like Madison Police Department and some of our other hospital partners and a few other partners who have some of the information that we're looking for so that we can do a complex analysis of what we're seeing around violence in Madison. And so those partners have been great. It's been an interesting dynamic to continue to work through and have an understanding of how we will use the data, what we will use, and how it will ultimately impact our delivery of the plan. Community Safety Intervention Team, or CSIT, is also an activity example. Increasing coordination of mental health and trauma services across agencies to support children, youth, and families exposed to multiple forms of violence. So again, that ties directly back to our supporting community engagement with children, youth, and families, and also a little bit of our bolstering and increasing intervention and continuous healing priority area. We are also looking to continue an exploration of a community safety worker pilot that is currently being done on the west side via the CBCR grant with Madison Police Department. And so in 2021, we'll be looking to continue supporting that pilot. It aids in conflict resolution and deterring law enforcement involvement from low-level conflict. So we're really excited about that pilot, and we'll see what the results come out in 2021. We are also looking to explore a group intervention model. And so this is a little bit of a more innovative approach to shots fired specifically, where communities create messaging campaigns and then also structural supports and system supports to ultimately aid an individual in deciding that enough is enough and shots fired won't be tolerated, and having a system that also supports that messaging. So again, we're in the infancy stages of looking at that, but is also a model that we're that we're examining. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things that will also be coming with the plan in 2021 is a reinvigoration of the Violence Prevention Coalition of Madison and Dane County. And so we've rethought and kind of re-strategized around how we wanted to facilitate the coalition moving forward, really wanting the partners at the table to have the most say and buy-in as to what the coalition is doing, but also using the plan, the roadmap to reduction as a guiding map as to what could be conducted from this coalition. And so we are utilizing a hub and spoke model, which has really been more familiarized in the opioid misuse community, around having the coalition serve as the hub with public health, Madison-Dane County's violence prevention unit, kind of supporting the coalition through technical assistance, evaluation, planning, and data, but having the coalition itself serve as a hub, and the agencies that make up, organizations, and community members, I should say, that make up the coalition really being the drivers of the work. And so again, you'll see that more in our strategies 2, 3, and 4, where that work is really being delivered by community partners. And the coalition will be there to, one, help inform public health around what's working, what's not working, but also give us a better sense around what some of the gaps are around why we're not able to achieve some of the things that are laid out in the plan. So again, we're hoping to relaunch the coalition in, I would say, January or February of 2021. Okay, and so as I mentioned earlier, and this is just a nice visual since I went through it a little quickly, this is the overview of the Violence Prevention Unit. And so again, we are hoping to be fully staffed up in this unit sooner rather than later. But I currently sit as the Policy Planning and Evaluation Division Director, and this Violence Prevention Unit would sit within my division. And so we are looking to move forward with hiring a Violence Prevention Program Manager, also looking to move forward with hiring a Violence Prevention Response and Engagement Coordinator. Okay, so next step. So this is an update as to where we are today. So the Violence Prevention Unit, as I mentioned earlier, we are requesting position authority for the 2 new positions through Dane County. We are planning for the next Violence Prevention Coalition of Dane County meeting, aiming for January, February of 2021. And we're actively working to improve our data infrastructure to aid us in being more forward-facing and allowing the public and stakeholders to be more informed about violence in Madison. So again, we're doing this in a 2-step approach. We really want to have that internal data structure working and kind of figured out with all of the kinks before we move to phase 2, which would be an outwardly facing one. We've seen and have some examples from some cities from all over the country who have an externally facing violence dashboard, and they've been able to talk to us a little bit around what worked for them, what didn't work for them. And so we are looking forward to having something for the community to be able to reference when looking at violence and violence data. For the roadmap to reduction, we are beginning our community and stakeholder feedback on the plan later this week. Actually, I believe it starts Thursday. And so the feedback is going to be incorporated, and further recommendations for the plan are going to be developed, in which we will be altering, tweaking, potentially removing or adding some things to the plan in December. Again, really aiming for that January of 2021 full plan release. We are also working very closely with CDD on developing an RFP funding opportunity to support elements of the plan, mostly within those areas of 2, 3, and 4, since that's where our areas of prevention are. And again, working with CDD to determine amounts, really dig into how we maximize the funding and get the most money out to the community as we can in these focus areas. And then, as I've said a few times, we are currently on track for release and implementation kickoff for January 2021. And last but certainly not least, this is just an overview of kind of what our milestones and timelines are for 2021. One of the things that we have taken into consideration is making sure that we are able to really lay a solid groundwork in 2021. So we are not overexpending ourselves by any means, especially since we have those 2 staffing gaps that will hopefully be filled sooner rather than later. But really want to make sure that we're building the solid foundation. So we've done a great job in the arena of strategic partnerships with that. And now it's time to actually build the foundation. And so that includes releasing the plan, making some additional tweaks to CSIT and our operational plans around CSIT, creating a central tracking system for those outcome measures of the plan, working in tangent with the coalition around that. And also setting up a timeline for us to start thinking about what 2022 will look like earlier in the year. And so we've got a couple of other milestones in there, and I'm happy to share the presentation. But I wanted to give you all a sneak peek of what we have planned for 2021. And that is the update I have. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ariel or Janelle?
Oops.
Go ahead, Barbara, and after you, Alder Hennick.
Okay. Ariel, could you pop up? I wanted you to pop up that slide that showed your next to last slide that you had up that showed the milestones.
Mm-hmm. This one?
Yes, that one. And so, first of all, let me just say that very impressive. And I know that this, it doesn't, it's a skeleton. It doesn't have, the meat on it. But just to see that there is a structure going forward, is very, very important. And the reason I call this slide up is that it's for milestone 1, 2, and 3 to consider coming back to the council, to the executive committee, and just updating us on, and that's all. And that was just a natural division. It's like, the milestone 1, 2, 3, and then coming and updating us, and then 4, 5, and 6, and updating us. And the reason that is so important, because when you talk about hotspots, I don't know if you've identified where the hotspots are, but they just seem to be spreading across the city. And it's really important to have a handle on what's happening in our city so that we can report that back to our constituents. And my other question is that the listening sessions, you said that you had you started the community listening sessions, or is that in your future planning?
Sure. So I mentioned 2 different listening sessions. There were some community police listening sessions that were done prior to me starting with PHMDC.
Okay.
I believe that was in 2018, but I might be wrong, so I can check on that. But we are starting this week our own set of community feedback sessions on the plan. So that is starting Thursday. We have some identified venues and groups that we are starting with and hoping that they are able to also push it to community members and other partners that we may not have reached. I will say with our shortened timeline, we are not going to have as broad of a group as we were hoping to have. However, what we've done is build in continuous feedback opportunities for the plan. So we're hoping through that mechanism, we will, 1, get a lot more youth engagement on giving us feedback around, especially that supporting children, youth, and families aspect around what do youth feel is really key and crucial that we might be missing to start addressing some of the violence. And also trying to get more of our just lay community members. So I think what we're doing, and we do a great job of, is really getting input and feedback from what I like to call our titans of community engagement. And so there are our partners and our agencies that we consistently hear from. And I think we have a gap around getting the everyday community member and what they feel needs to be changed and happen. And so looking to those continuous feedback opportunities to not just be a one-time you missed it, but really building a system that if you have an idea, we want to hear about it, and trying to build a system of keeping those lines of communication more open. So again, that process is starting on Thursday, but that shortened period for us to get the plan done is not going to be the only opportunity for feedback.
Thank you. And my final question is, when does the CSIT, is that it? When do you meet?
Yeah, so we meet weekly. Right now, we have a standing weekly meeting. CSIT can also be activated and has been activated after what I'll call major events of violence. And so that's usually if there are more than 2 victims. If it's a homicide, there are a few other criteria that I don't have on hand. But when those more high acuity instances happen, we rapidly convene within 48 hours to assess the situation. We usually get an update from MPD, and then we're usually able to start strategizing and deploying community resources and supports. I would say over the past 4 months, the other thing we've been doing is also cataloging what our gaps are. So we're able to deploy supports that we have, and that's great. And we've now been keeping a better track of what supports do we wish we had that we feel like we would need to deploy at this time too. And so looking to work closer with CDD on trying to develop at least one to start off funding opportunity for a community agency that may be able to meet that need and be a part of our CSIT team who are able to rapidly deploy in those situations. Most times it's been around continuous healing or support for witnesses.
Thank you. That ends my question. Thank you.
Alder Hannock.
Yes, thank you. I noticed that you had a data analyst. What kind of data are you going to be analyzing, and what kind of metrics are you looking for? What are kind of your points of success?
Great question. So our data analyst is actually working, I would say, in 2 facets. So one is more around our process and outcome measures around the plan. And so that also, once we come out of COVID a little bit, will also be a little bit of work of an evaluator that we have within the division. But for right now, it solely lies with our data analyst. The other portion of that person's job is the more concrete data, as I like to call it. And so really looking at homicide data, looking at weapons offense data, looking at the demographics of both perpetrators and victims within that data set. Looking at geographical regions in which the violence is occurring, and also doing some deeper dives, right? We want to know, is there a certain time or day or season that we're seeing an uptick in violence? We have not gotten to the stage where we're doing that deep level of complex analysis yet, but we are hoping to get there soon. So really what we'd like to do first is really just get our hands on that comprehensive data set and start pulling things and seeing what themes we start to see. One of the things we know about Madison is that our violence footprint looks a little bit different than other major cities. For one, we have a very young demographic of perpetrators here, and that's actually not the norm, I would say, from my experience. And so it is really... it's really crucial that we start doing that level of analysis. But again, we've been really focused on trying to get the plan out the door and start planning for some of those outcome measures, and then working a lot closer with MPD specifically on getting some of that data analyzed.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. And then the other one was you've got you use a lot of acronyms and a lot of kind of catchy words, and that's good. But can you give us a little bit more examples of kind of what the actual day-to-day interaction with residents is, and what some examples of what individuals will be really doing on the ground to make some of these things come to fruition?
Good question. So I'll go back to this. And so right now, this is what our current structure looks like with those 2 vacant positions. What we are hoping for out of our violence prevention response and engagement coordinator is to be more of that intervention on the ground person who is really dealing in the response and engagement aspects of a violent event. And so, for example, one of the things that we have that's new in this position that we haven't started doing yet is having specific engagement with residents of a certain area and providing some what we're calling community level support. So whether that's a listening session, right? Because this community has some strong ideas around what they need in order to start preventing some of the violence in their community. Whether it is providing or working with an agency that's able to conduct community healing circles that really get to the roots of some of the trauma that's caused by a violent event happening. Those are the 2 examples I have offhand. So that's really where some of this more on the ground work is happening. I will say within our priority area that is fostering strong neighborhoods, one of the objectives that we currently have in there is trying to encourage people to have a little bit more of civic engagement. And so we are hoping to work with Kwasi a little bit on some ideas as to how we can provide more opportunities for residents to be engaged in the process. There are studies that have been shown that civic engagement actually does foster strong neighborhoods. And again, with fostering strong neighborhoods being a protective factor of violence, that there's a link there. It's a few steps removed, but that's really where we want as public health practitioners to focus our lens of prevention.
Gotcha. So are there other than the community organizations, are there neighborhood associations that you'd consider working with, or how would you make those contacts?
Yeah, good question. So I believe we actually have working partnerships with some of those neighborhood organizations. This is where the work of our current violence prevention coordinator, Randy Molina, comes in. He is really him and Jared Jones are both our partnership gurus. And so they've been able to establish the relationships and start working with some of those neighborhood organizations.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And Ariel got a couple questions.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about strong neighborhoods, it just made me think about recently, prior to COVID, I should say. I don't want to get in trouble by gathering more than one person, but I was out talking to some residents, and one of the things that I thought was very interesting is that when I mentioned neighborhoods, they said to me, I'm only here, this is just a stepping stone. In other words, I don't identify with this neighborhood. This is just a stepping stone for me to get to another apartment, for me to move to wherever. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about strong neighborhoods, how are you going to get that message across to individuals and families who feel that they're just there paying rent and waiting for their lease to end or whatever the situation is, but they're not identifying with, I'm in a neighborhood?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'll be honest, it's something that we have struggled with, and I wouldn't say we've found a solid answer to yet. But we are seeing that, right? We are talking to community members who say exactly what you've said as to, I don't really feel a connection to my neighbors. I don't know my neighbors. I don't know my neighbors until something happens, and then I see them on the street. And so looking for even ways to create neighborhood engagement, whether that's, and again, I think COVID unfortunately makes it difficult times, right? I mean, I think back to even just having neighborhood meetings. I know once upon a time there were block parties. Even just having events within a certain geographical region can sometimes pull neighbors together. Again, I think that makes it challenging right now. And I don't think that's the the end-all be-all solution to that, but we do recognize that is absolutely a factor in this.
And I think it's, I hate to say this, but I think it's more common not to know your neighbor, right? So that's not the measuring stick I was using, but not to recognize you're in a neighborhood is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go on to Alder Kimball. Go ahead, Alder Kimball.
Thanks, and thanks so much for the presentation. Can you talk about what kind of violence the Violence Prevention Unit is concerned with?
Sure. So we would like to have a very wide purview of violence. We recognize that right now the uptick that we've seen in shots fired and gun violence, specifically in Madison, is concerning and gets our attention. But it is not the only form of violence we are necessarily focused on. Within the plan, we do also address, not robustly, I will admit, but a little bit more on the domestic violence and sexual assault types of violence. And there's two reasons for that. One, Madison and Dane County has a magnificent infrastructure for supporting domestic violence victims and also sexual violence victims. Is it perfect? No system is perfect. And so that's why we address those elements in the plan, especially around supporting those organizations and really creating, again, that robust system around the risk and protective factors of violence, as the shared risk and protective factors are amongst gun violence, domestic violence, sexual violence, interpersonal violence. We also see intentional violence, which is usually more around your self-harm and suicide. And so we try to incorporate all of those elements into this comprehensive violence prevention plan, given that they all share so many protective and risk factors. However, there are definitely elements within the plan that are really more focused on interpersonal conflict and gun violence specifically.
So are the domestic abuse and sexual assault organizations, are they part of your CSIT weekly meetings?
They are not. Right now we have participation via the Victims Assistance Office, via the DA's office. And so her name is Julie Foley, who usually attends our meetings. And anytime we've had concerns around domestic violence or sexual violence, she has actually been the connector of those organizations to CSIT. We are open and would be willing to have participation. I think sometimes the challenge is we don't always know about those instances. A lot of times those instances aren't captured, aren't heard. And so a lot of that work is done typically elsewhere and not in a fashion where CSIT can respond. And so that's really, I think, been more the reason as to why we haven't had strong participation in that. However, we have had representatives and hopefully will continue to have representation from the domestic violence and sexual violence and also suicide and self-harm sectors on the coalition and have been very strong partners with us thus far.
And they've helped in developing the plan?
So we've had some, again, I think times of COVID, we would have preferred to develop this plan a little differently, but we have a very robust group of those individuals who work in that field who are giving us tangible feedback on the plan and helping us make that section of the plan specifically a little more robust.
Okay, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Alder Carter, I think you're muted.
Am I muted? Oh, for God's sake. I was saying all kind of accolades, but now I'll just give you the cliff notes. Thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to you returning sometime in February. I really appreciate both you and Janelle. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So we will move on to, I believe, Barbara McKinney, you are sponsoring this. Item 6, 62636. Would you like to speak on that?
Yes, I'll just speak very briefly on that. The reason that I put it forward is to have where is my notes? To have it documented so that there is a process. We've had several times where an alder has left that position, and then we were very lucky this time that it was a very short period of time when all the gap between Alder Moreland left, and for us to really have 11 people interested in taking that on. But when an alder leaves, it really is important to let the constituents know there is a consistent coverage of responding to events that might come up in the district. Nothing came up at all, but we were able to, as information about COVID, any updates that came out that we as all alders were getting, those were referred on over to District 7. And if there was a question, I think that there was one that came up, at least the resident had a contact. And so to have a process in place that automatically goes into effect when an alder is absent from a district for whatever reason there is, it is very, very important. As we begin to look at better coordination and better system of government, it just says that there's a process in place, and we just automatically, it moves right into to activation when an alder leaves a district. And so that's why I put it forward, is to make sure that that happens automatically.
Are there any questions? Okay, do we need, this was referral from the Common Council. Do we need a motion on this? Lisa, are you still on?
I am, and yes, you do need a motion, Alder Carter.
Okay, thank you. Can we get a motion, Alder McKinney?
So I move adoption of this item.
And can I get a second?
I'll second that.
It's been properly moved and second. Are there any objections to recording a unanimous vote? I do not see any hands, so I will record a unanimous vote for item 6, Legistar 62636. Thank you. We will move on to update. And it's item 7, 63085. Alder Furman.
Thank you, Council President. I will try to be brief with my update on what's new with the TFOG's implementation work group. We have had some changes in membership. Alder Skidmore has now joined us. Alder Abbas and Alder Tierney is no longer part of the committee. And at the last meeting, I was elected chair, hence me giving this update today. We've been focused at our meetings on our last few meetings on budget amendments that the council saw, both at the Finance Committee as well as the council budget meeting. And we've been focused on different ways of looking at what to do with a referendum related to recommendations from the TFOG group for the Common Council. That what the work group decided is in front of the council as an introduction this evening, and will be voted and debated on the December 1st meeting. But ultimately, the work group decided that it was best to do an advisory referendum for 2021 and then a binding referendum for 2022 based on the results of advisory referendum. And the real goal of that is to try to get a better understanding of the differences in public opinion on full-time and size of the council. I think was a concern on the work group that if we just put forward an idea of full-time with 10 members, that there was a decent shot that it would fail because people might have been okay with full-time but might not be okay with 10, might want 20. And so what's being introduced this evening, and again, will be discussed and debated at our council meeting on December 1st, really does give us an ability to get a much better understanding from the public on what they'd like to see, and then do something binding for 2022 with more than enough time for implementation in the 2023 election. In our upcoming meeting on our agenda, we will be reviewing the final report and recommendations from the President's Work Group to review council communication tools and processes. We're going to discuss some next steps on resident and community engagement and the administrative staff team that's been created, and continue our discussion on the TFOG's recommendations. I'm happy to answer any questions, and Alder Kimball is also on the work group if she has anything to add. Obviously, she's welcome to speak up. Looks like she's good. But if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Is there a work plan that we can see?
No. So I was actually just reminded that we have not created that. As I said, I just became chair. We're going to talk about that more at our next meeting. Okay. Karen pointed out to me that the resolution that created this said that we were supposed to create a work plan, and I didn't realize that, and I will make sure that that's something we're focused on starting at our next meeting.
And then my other question, and if anyone has any questions, please do your raise hand feature. My other question is, why not do two referendums, two binding referendum, one for full time, and then what was the other one? Splitting them in two.
Yeah, so
versus an advisory, because that way you'll find out whether they want full-time or part-time, increased salary or not. Can you answer that, please?
I'm sure I'll do my best, and I may ask Alder Kimball.
I might have mangled what you said.
No, yeah, I'll possibly ask Alder Kimball to follow up. But to be clear, when it comes to full time, we actually don't need to put that out to referendum. The only things that we need to change in our charter ordinance that we're looking to get feedback from the public on is the size of the council.
That's what I meant. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. The size of the council and the length of the term. And I think the belief was that in order to get a better feel for what people's feelings are on size. I think at some point we did talk about possibly having a binding on 10 or 20 or higher, but really felt like the best way to get an idea of how to craft something binding would be to do that first step of something on the ballot in April 2021, with the idea that it doesn't cost us anything. The only thing it costs us is a little bit of time, but the binding referendum would be on the ballot for April 2022, which would be more than enough time to implement new maps, as well as have people prepare if we go down to 10 for the new district sizes, et cetera. I think the thought was that just gives us a lot more detail, a lot more information. And I do actually would like to put Alder Kimball on the spot if there's anything she wants to add to that.
Yeah, I'll say, President Carter, that the splitting of the question was the thing that really made us eventually go to this proposal for an advisory referendum next year and then a binding in the spring, to divide up a lot of these questions into portions that the public could really understand, so we could get direction on, size of council, and also, full-time, part-time, which, as Alder Furman said, technically doesn't have to go to binding. On the work plan, we don't have a document that says work plan, but we really did. We have been working on a work plan based on prioritization of recommendations. So generally our work plan is to work through the recommendations and put them forward to the council as legislative items to vote on. So that's the general work plan. And early in the group, we did a prioritization of those recommendations. And so that's how we've been working through this work plan. But, I think spending a little bit of time to, put together a document that says work plan on top, that's easy for members of the public to look at and understand and see, identify what this is.
Right. Well, not even just members of the public. I think that the members of the council would like to see what is being worked on prior to it becoming a discussion at the Common Council meeting.
Basically, every single one of the recommendations in that TFOGS report is we're working through them, and that's what is going to be discussed at TFOGS implementation. And we did a prioritization exercise last summer, and we've been going according to that priority. But the point is well taken, that to have something that's easily identifiable by any human who can read, to see, this is what this means, this is what this document means, this is the order of work. We really should do that. So thanks for the reminder.
Thank you.
And I would just like to point out, so that what Alder Kimball was referring to, that tracker, it has been linked and is linked on our next agenda. So if you go to our agenda, there is that spreadsheet. But I also agree with Alder Kimball's feedback that we will, do a better job of making that clearer in the future.
Alder, thank you, Alder Furman, Alder Harrington McKinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to ask that in the period of the 2 years that the task force was at work, was there any discussion within your community groupings about possibly a full, I know it ended up in your final report, but was there a discussion about making alders full-time or part-time? Was that discussion ever entered upon over the 2 years that you were in that process?
Yes, it was entered upon multiple times in multiple contexts, not only in our meetings, but in the town halls that we did, and in our public engagement exercises, and in our in the survey. So that question was asked in many different ways to many different people, and that's why it shows up in the report, because it's the result of all those conversations that turned it into a recommendation.
Okay, and so just a follow-up question, that you're comfortable with, there was a robust discussion of full-time alders, part-time alders, all of that during the course of the 2 years of the task force?
Oh, yes. And it was held multiple times, early on, in the middle, and at the end. The discussion on that particular topic happened in many different ways at many different times.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions regarding item 7? Harrington McKinney. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Let's go on to item 8, 63090, the special meeting to discuss chief of staff position. The two possible dates are the 24th and the 10th. Is there any preference for those two dates? Okay, if not, I would like to put both of them on hold for our special CCEC meeting, but we'll do the 24th for the chief of staff position. And Lisa, if you can make sure that Mr. Harper can attend that meeting. And if not, then I guess we'll do the 10th, but I'm hoping to do the 24th so we can talk about that as soon as possible.
Okay.
Thank you. So for future items, we have actually a few future items to schedule. Alder Harrington McKinney, your hand is up.
Yes, just a clarifying question. At the meeting that Harper will be attending, is that when the exit interview for our current chief of staff be presented? Is that the outline? Or I'm just trying to get an idea.
I am hoping that he would have already had the exit interview.
Okay.
By the time we have the meeting on the 24th.
Okay, and that should be on the agenda for the 24th. And
that is a special meeting just to talk about the chief of staff position. And that's why I'm inviting Mr. Harper to that meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I just wanted to say that we're going to be having a few special meetings to discuss a lot of things that we need to catch up on. So I will let you know when those are coming up, and we'll try to, if nothing else, have at least one a month. But there's a few. Oh, Alder Kimball, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
No, sorry, that was a residual from the last time around.
Okay. So I will let you know what those are, and we will really try to push forward. I won't say rapidly, but we're going to try to push forward. Does anyone have any other things to discuss? I know that Alder Abbas wanted us to refer his substitute to the December 1st meeting. But other than that, any other concerns before we sign off? Okay, then can I get a motion to adjourn in a second?
Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn, and Alder Skidmore seconds.
Second.
And thank you. I would like to record this as a unanimous vote, and I don't see any hands objecting to it. So thank you all. We'll see you in an hour.